A recent report has dropped that indicates the Toronto Raptors are about to potentially do something crazy, as they are heavily scouting Bronny James, which has some Raptors fans speculating that they could be going after LeBron in the near future as well. So we'll discuss that, including Scottie having a pretty solid performance in this year's All-Star game. So lots of stuff to break down. Before we do, folks, again, over 56% of our viewers are not subscribed to the channel. We want to keep you up to date with all of the latest Toronto Raptors news. The All-Star game just happened. A little break here in Raptors sort of land and news fairs and stuff, but the second half of the season should be very interesting for this team to see whether or not they can turn the ship around or they do end up sort of going for that draft pick. So we want to keep you up to date, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Again, apologize for the wind outside, still in Panama, but I want to keep you up to date delivering the news. So let's dive straight into it, because news has come out that the Raptors are seriously targeting Bronny James in this year's draft class. Now, this on the surface is pretty wild. Now, Bronny James is probably the most notable, the most famous prospect in this upcoming draft, or we don't know if he's going to stay in school. We're not sure what's going to happen because he's had a bit of a tumultuous first year in college, but is definitely one of those guys that a lot of NBA fans are keeping their eyes on. And Shams basically dropped a really interesting report recently saying that the Raptors have been closely scouting Bronny James. Now, in the past few days, we've heard that the Lakers, the two teams in LA, have also taken a look at him as well. But the Raptors seem to be the team that is most sort of linked to potentially, or at least in terms of how much they're currently scouting Bronny. Now, if you're not familiar with Bronny James, he is the son of LeBron James, and he's a guy that's been sort of known throughout the ranks for a pretty long time. Notable name in high schools, put up some ridiculous stats, but has had an interesting college experience because right now, in terms of stats, he's a 6'4", 210 guard, playing down in California, but only 6 points per game, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and not 18 games played. And some people might look at that and be like, hey, Ben, in college stats, it's different. We've seen European guys not play too much or not get that many points. Heck, even Scottie, in his draft, he didn't have the most overwhelming, most great box score statistics, but the really concerning thing about his numbers during his rookie year are the sort of efficiency, because he's shooting 36% from the field and 27.5% from behind the three-point line and 62% from the free throw line. Even a little bit more concerning because free throws, again, there's might be variability, especially only an 18-game sample size with threes and stuff, but free throws, you should be hitting. That's a really good indication in terms of the potential of one's jump shot regarding their form and if it does need to be changed or anything like that. So Bronny James, he hasn't been efficient scoring the basketball. His shooting hasn't been as advertised as some people were expecting coming out of college. And, defensively, he's not putting up the craziest sort of box score stats, only 0.2 blocks per game and 0.8 steals per night. But he does have two areas of his game which have NBA scouts really still holding him in a higher regard than your just average sort of 5 point per game sort of point guard in college. And one is apparently his defense is absolutely elite. Apparently he's a very strong defender, at the guard position, can hound really anyone at the 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4, not the 4. 1, 2, 3, in terms of those positions that I've read. So people regard his defense highly, and he also has a lot of athletic upside in terms of what he could develop and build into, considering his dad is LeBron James. So, there's that sort of there. The defense is already polished and something that I could get slided into an NBA team and have an NBA-ready skill. And apparently the passing genetics that came from LeBron James have also been passed down to Bronny. He's a good facilitator. He's a good playmaker. He's a guy that can set up his teammates at that guard position, which is great to see. So, he has those NBA skills, but again, the stats haven't really been indicative that he should be, a draftable, top first round type of guy. And the Toronto Raptors obviously traded a pick at this year's trade deadline, but have potentially their first round pick this year, depending if it falls in the bottom 6. Again, we'll see how the Tampa tank, how that all sort of produces and how that rolls out. Or, we'll see. We also have those later picks. The Detroit Pistons second, which is essentially like a late first, as well as our Indiana pick, which should be conveyed this season as well. So basically 3 picks to potentially draft Bronny James with this year if he does end up if we do sort of scout him well and validate him. And again, apologize to the wind. It's the only place I can really record here right now. But, we have those 3 picks to potentially slide in and pick up Bronny James. But given his stats, even though he does have those NBA-ready skills, some people are saying that, he didn't make the mock drafts. He's not a guy that's going to get drafted this year. Some people are saying he needs to go back to college. And there's one major reason as to why. And some people are sort of writing the season off in terms of the bad stats because he has these NBA-ready skills, but he's a poor finisher around the rim. He's not attacking the rim well, and he's not efficient shooting the basketball here now at this point. But he did miss a chunk of, the prep for this season. I believe he missed a chunk of games for in college as well this season, as he did suffer a cardiac condition. He had a cardiac arrest earlier this year. Scary moment, when it initially came out, but he was in stable condition. He was able to return to basketball and all things like that. But again, you have that sort of happen currently this year, then that has to be taken into account in terms of the numbers you're putting up in college, and that's why some people have been calling for him to go back to college. But obviously, for another year next year, where he has a full off season to really get healthy, to be in the swing of things, and have less sort of turmoil with his health, out there on the court. And yes, that's probably the smart move if he wasn't LeBron James' son. But he's LeBron's son. LeBron might end up going to play for whatever team that Bronny James gets drafted by. So there's probably good reasoning why, especially while LeBron is still in the league, for him to go into the NBA draft, get his bag, get his immediate NBA paycheck, and, get his foot in the door with an NBA team, and then really earn his spot, when LeBron James is sort of out of the mix, out of the league. There's no chance of recruiting him to your team if Bronny James is not there. So I think that's still a reason why I expect him to declare for this year's NBA draft. But even though it's probably the right move for his basketball development to stay in college, but should the Toronto Raptors do this? Because again, Sham says we're scouting them pretty directly. I mean, if it ends up leading us, LeBron James, even though he's in the twilight of his career, I'd say do it. It'd be a cool moment in NBA history, LeBronto sort of turnaround time. We have those later firsts and stuff. Are you chucking up first or maybe keeping LeBron? Yes, but I don't know. It'd be cool if we could get LeBron. Other than that, if there's no guarantee or assurances that you could scout or recruit LeBron James if you draft Bronny, then I'm less inclined. Now, again, a point guard that can play defense, can pass, two very attractive skills, at that guard position in today's NBA, but going to want to see more in terms of scoring, in terms of dribbling and stuff, from the scouting reports I've read regarding Bronny, to use him with, we don't have a late second. We have potentially an early first, a mid first, as well as a very, very early second. So those are valuable picks. You can get solid players out of that. So I wouldn't be just throwing it away for Bronny James if it's too much of a risk. But again, I trust the scouts of the Toronto Raptors way more than I do me, who's read just a few scouting reports on the internet regarding Bronny and watched a few highlights and games. But let me know what you guys think. Would you guys like to see Bronny James selected by the Toronto Raptors in the draft? But next thing we're taking a look at is Scottie Barnes cooking in the All-Star game. Now, the All-Star game is a complete sort of it's not something we're going to read too much into. And I'm not going to talk on it for too long in this vid because the All-Star game, no defense is played. It's getting worse. The scores, the East scored over 200 points in this game. So it's, Scottie Barnes having a solid showing is not an indicator that, hey, he's the next superstar in the NBA or anything like that. But the one thing it does show and makes me happy about sort of watching it, looking at the stats, looking at the numbers, is he belonged in that game. He played really well. He fit alongside all these other stars. Had the opportunity to chat, and we see videos of him coming out in the skills competition, talking to other NBA All-Stars, potentially recruiting for Toronto maybe in the future. Who really knows? But in the game, Scottie Barnes ended up having 16 points, had 8 rebounds, 3 assists in just 18 minutes, 7 of 10 shooting, 2 of 5 from the three-point line. So, Scottie looked confident out there. He didn't feel out of place. He took a bunch of shots. So, I'm proud of our guy Scottie out there showing his thing for the Alpha, representing the Toronto Raptors in this year's in his first ever All-Star game. Hopefully many more to come. But folks, let me know what you guys think about all this Toronto Raptors news. You guys have best to make this far again. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.